Hey, Kathy.
How
All
are you
right,
guys?
guys, I want to welcome everybody to another year. We are back for our monthly show, rebranded as Work Comp Today.
Hey,
We've
Kathy.
called it.
How
All
are you
right,
guys?
guys, let me turn off the volume here. We have called it Alabama Work Comp Today, but we felt like because we hit articles and information and news from all over the country, we're now Work Comp Today. So, David, thank you for that suggestion. How are you doing today, bud?
I'm doing great. Happy 2021. I can't believe January is almost over. It's flying by, but we started off the year great with Alabama winning its 18th national championship in football. And our basketball team is undefeated in the SEC. So things couldn't get much better.
Cathy, you see what kind of priorities we have around here at our firm, don't you?
Well, I see what's behind David there, and I think you just highlighted that, so I
Yeah.
get it.
Well, we want to welcome our guest and friend, Cathy Surbeck out of Philadelphia with the Freedman Lorry law firm. Cathy, thank you for spending some time with us today on our monthly show.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's absolutely our pleasure. Before we hop into this month's articles and newsworthy things to discuss, talk a little bit about your firm and your practice, and then we'll get started.
Okay, so I practice at a small personal injury, labor, and employment law firm. We're basically an all practice group. So my particular practice is Pennsylvania State Workers' Comp. I also do federal longshore workers' comp, hearing loss claims, and Social Security disability. I have ventured into the PA unemployment world as well. And I have done some personal injury things, but that's not really my forte. Other members of my firm handle the personal injury. I mostly do the client management portion of the personal injury firm. Like I said, we are historically my firm's background is in the longshore world. And we had a very, very active longshore practice, especially back in the 70s when the Philadelphia shipyard was probably one of the biggest in the country. And we had a ton of work coming out of the longshore um, practice out of there. So I think there's a little bit of that in Alabama down in the Gulf Shores,
Mhm.
and the out of the Longshore Workers' Compensation Act is also what's called the Defense Base Act, which is any contractors who get injured working at bases or overseas, especially in the Middle East now, Afghanistan, Germany, whatever. And those flow out of the Longshore Act, and we handle those cases as well. So those cases, believe it or not, come from all over the world.
Mhm.
So, a lot of our clients are United States citizens, obviously, but they are placed all over the world. So we're able to handle those claims because of the nature of the practice. And it gets assigned to different regional offices. And that is being what's the word? Recalibrated under the new administration. So there's a new director and some new rules coming out. So we, as practitioners representing injured workers, we are excited about the new administration, as most people are, because the NLRB was not very friendly towards workers,
Mhm.
and as you can imagine. So there's new leadership coming, and I think everyone's very hopeful as to what's going to happen going forward with that. Uh, so while my practice in state workers comp is solely in Pennsylvania, I also have a federal practice now that where we represent clients across the country,
Yeah.
and I am active in several national organizations. One of them being the Workers Injury Law Group. I'm also active in the ABA, and I'm also a fellow in the College of Workers' Compensation Lawyers. So,
Well, very good. Well, thank you. That was going to lead me to my next thing. David, you've known Cathy longer than I because of the membership that we now all have with WILG. And if you would just share for just a minute or so about WILG and its importance and how it's brought Cathy together with us for today.
Yeah. So the Workers Injury Law and Advocacy Group is a nationwide organization comprised of lawyers that represent injured workers or their families if their loved one passed away while working. So it's work comp lawyers. It's as Cathy mentioned, it's lawyers that handle Defense-Based Act, Longshore, and we also have Social Security disability lawyers in that group. And again, it's about 1,000 lawyers across the nation, and it's as I like to tell people, it's kind of made the world or the country smaller for us, and then we've gotten to know great lawyers like Cathy all over the U.S. And for instance, today I needed a lawyer for one of my clients in St. Louis, Missouri. I needed a disability lawyer in St. Louis, Missouri, and I was able to find one through our WILG network. So it's a great organization comprised of great lawyers, and we're privileged to be a part of it, and have learned a lot and met a lot of great people. And Cathy is I think the newest officer in the organization. Is that right, Cathy?
Yes. I have the hardest working officer position, which is secretary.
Yeah.
Yes, and just to highlight what David said, it's a great resource not only to find lawyers, whether it's in the work injury arena or disability, but if you need a general trust in the state's lawyer, if you need a contract lawyer. And in addition to that, it's also a great resource for getting treatment. If you have a client who happens to live in North Dakota or South Carolina and they need a treater, whether it's local to you and they moved there or somebody somebody. So it's a fantastic resource, and it also has a paralegal section, and it's very proactive. We are very active in legislative, being on top of legislative things. We have a very active lobbying arm. So, if you're not familiar with us, I encourage you to check us out and see what we have. We have regional conferences. We have a lot of information on the website. So, it's like I said, it's a great resource.
Hopefully this October, we can all get back together again. I'm hoping, not just virtually, but actually in person. That would be nice. But it's also been a great resource for David and me for this show. We've been doing this for 15 months, and I think every member or every guest that we've had on has been a member of the program. So now I think it's time for us to kind of dive in. We've got 3 or 4 articles of interest. Our theme, obviously, for the greater part of 2020 has been COVID and pandemic related. And some of what we're going to talk about today is impacted or is part of this. But I think it's an evolving conversation. And it's now to the point where people need to know certain new things that are on the horizon. So the first article I want to talk about, it deals with vaccines. And the title of our article here is Mandatory Vaccine Policies May Have Workers' Comp Implications. And gosh, this has been a very heavy topic at our practice in the last couple of weeks. And I suspect, Cathy, it's come across your desk a time or two in the last couple of weeks. What did you take away from this article? And then we don't have to stay within the article, but staying within this topic, just to kind of expand a little bit, because I think there's some real stuff here that employers and employees really should be informed about.
Yeah, well, I think to me, if you're going to require that your employee get the vaccine, then you have to pay for it. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. Although I have not looked into, but I am thinking that the vaccines are covered by your health insurance. I'm not 100% sure. I know you get COVID tests for free, so I'm not really sure how the vaccines are covered. But I think if your employer is going to require a vaccine, then I think they have to pay for it. I think that that's a no-brainer to me. And I've also heard on the news that some of the big companies, maybe it was Dollar, who said they were going to pay for 4 hours, give you paid time for 4 hours for you to go get a vaccine. Now that's assuming it only takes 4 hours to go get one. And and depending on the vaccine, right now the only ones that are on the market require 2 shots, right? So is that 4 hours per shot? I'm sure that the employer is not going to quibble about it because they'd rather have a safe workforce that can come back to work, than not to pay those 4 hours. And then I thought about it last night while I was getting ready for this. I'm like, any complications from a vaccine, for getting a vaccine that's required for your job is work related. I don't think there's any way around it. So for an employer, you weigh the risk benefits, right? The costs of the vaccine, how does it implicate your workforce? Is it going to get your workforce back to work and to be safe amongst the employees? And are you in an industry that has a lot of contact with the public? Because if you can say, for example, healthcare workers, grocery workers, anything like that, if you can say, look, my workforce is vaccinated, here's the vaccine card. Somebody who comes in and claims, well, I think I got COVID from your store or coming to your, and you can say, you know, the likelihood is probably low because guess what? 100% of my workforce is vaccinated or whatever it may be. On the one hand. On the other hand, I know there's been a lot of discussion out there. I have not personally come across anyone who said no to the vaccine, but I know there's a segment of the population out there who don't want to get it.
Cathy, come visit down south. Plenty of them.
I think it has become so politicized, right? That it's become like a red state, blue state, geographic, small town, big city.
Yep.
Whether you're from a minority class, whether, you know, what industry you're in. I had a new client come in today who's a registered nurse, and she's all for it. And, you know, she's having a problem, you know, hers is not going to get here for another 3 weeks. And she was expressing some frustrations with that about getting that. So I think, I mean, look, you're always going to have a segment who don't want to get vaccinated. I mean, and that's from babies forward, right? So the question becomes, can you mandate it? And in states, and I was talking to David a little bit earlier about that, in states that have legislation where there's a presumption in your favor, I wonder if the legislature can also write in that you have to get vaccinated.
Cathy, we know healthcare workers who don't want to get vaccinated. Can you believe that?
So do you sign? So then what's the implication on the other side? I think if I was defending it, I would argue if you're a healthcare worker, you are provided the vaccine, you're given the opportunity to get the vaccine, you decline the vaccine, and then you get sick from it at work. I think there's you can rebut the presumption because there's healthcare directives, you know, there's a CDC guidelines. So I think they have to think of, we need to have better education on the vaccine and getting it, not getting it, and having people understand their legal rights to it. And maybe you have a medical reason why you can't get it. Maybe you're allergic to whatever the vaccine is out of, but I don't think so. I think those are few and far between. So I think if you're in an industry like a healthcare worker, a first responder, somebody on the front lines who in your state has a presumption for COVID in your favor and you decline to get the vaccine, I think you're going to put yourself at risk in having your workers' comp claim denied.
Yeah. Hey, Dave, what does Alabama say about the presumption?
Doesn't exist here.
Like a lot of other things, unfortunately.
And unfortunately probably won't ever exist. And I'll point out a group to you, Cathy, or add to the groups you mentioned about healthcare workers, frontline workers, and those that deal with the public. I think workers that congregate together, like meat packing and poultry workers, they're close together. We saw big outbreaks in those industries, and those workers need to be vaccinated as well.
Yeah.
It's just too much. Yeah.
Let me throw this to you. The EEOC, as well as OSHA, have said that employers can mandate that their employees get the shots. They can mandate that, okay? Well, what happens when you have an employee, David, who says, I'm not getting the vaccine. I don't care what your rules and your policies at ABC company now say. I want to come to work, but I'm not getting the vaccine. If you're the employer, how are you going to handle that?
You know, it depends on what their reason or their rationale for not getting the vaccine is. Is it religious based, or is it just personal preference? Because some jobs, the employer can require that they get the vaccine, specifically our healthcare workers.
Yeah.
So some people may be protected from that, and some people may not have any protections from that. Kathy, what do you think about that?
Well, I think along those lines, I think it depends if you're in a union or not. If you have a union contract, what does your union say? Some, one of the unions here is the hospital workers. I think they've been pushing for a vaccine. So you have to, I think there's multiple steps that have to be taken. I think there has to be a lot of communication. I think union leadership needs to have a very honest discussion with their membership about what they're recommending, and everyone has to be on the same page. But I mean, most states that I know, it's employment at will, correct?
That's right.
Very little union activity in Alabama.
Yeah, absent a union contract to protect you, you're an employee at will, and you can be hired and fired for any reason. And if the vaccine mandate is across the board and not targeting one segment, I don't think you can say it's discriminatory.
Well, but I still think that that's not going to stop people from filing claims of discrimination. And I suspect the EEOC is going to see a spike during this year and the next year for claims of some type of discriminatory intent leading to termination or being let go. But
yeah, I think you're right. I think it's going to expand beyond our small world of workers' comp and have more broad implications in the employment sector.
Yeah. Well, guys, I know that topic right there will be a future topic on this show for months to come, but we've got some other good articles, and I want to welcome our guest, Cathy Surbeck from Philadelphia with the law firm of Freedman and Lorry. They do work comp, longshoremen, and all kind of employment-related cases, helping folks who've been hurt in some capacity on the job, similar to what Dave and I do at Nomberg Law Firm in Birmingham. We're so pleased to have Cathy with us, and we are plowing through our group of articles for this month for Work Comp Today. And guys, I want to pivot. We're going to go to an Atlanta Journal-Constitution article, and I hate that this is one of our topics for this month, but I'm sure this is not going to be a one-off. This is going to be more and more in the news coming up. And the title is, Man Pleads Guilty for Faking COVID-19 Diagnosis to Defraud Employer. And I suspect he is not the only one who's done this. He just happens to be the one who got caught. And Dave, I hate this fella out of Morrow, Georgia, but he's in some kind of trouble. What did he do?
Yeah. So he defrauded his company, which was a Fortune 500 company, but that article did not list the company name. They wanted to be, I guess, anonymous. But he cost them thousands of dollars for faking a COVID-19 diagnosis. He's a bad criminal in that he's been busted several times before on similar scams, as the article points out. But what happened was the company had to shut down, had to clean the facility so that their productivity stopped. And but he has a sordid past of doing this kind of things, including faking that a child of his had died and he submitted for bereavement leave. So he's just a bad person.
Well, Cathy, have you seen this type of activity in Philadelphia or heard of this?
You know what? I have not personally seen it, but interestingly enough, my husband, who is not even in our area of law, saw this because he does finance work, and he helps companies do ESOPs, which is employee stock options and things like that. So one of the companies that they were counseling in Florida is a roofing company. And they had an employee come in making a COVID claim. And they were getting ready to do what this gentleman's employer did, shut down the plant or shut down the operation, clean, send everybody home. And then they thought, you know what? We want to see a positive COVID test before we do this. They asked for a COVID test. He prevaricated. He never provided it. And turns out, again, he was making a fraudulent claim. So they were able to cut it off at the pass, so to speak, and not have to shut down their plant because he provide them with a positive COVID test. So I haven't heard of any other instances here in Pennsylvania of that, but I wouldn't be surprised. And I think a lot of employers are asking for a positive COVID test. And on the flip side, I think employers are asking for a negative COVID test before you can come back to work as well. You know.
Yeah. And on a related topic, we've talked about work comp fraud before on this program, and I don't have the exact stats in front of me, but there's a lawyer in North Carolina named Lynn Jernigan who puts together the top 10 list of work comp fraud every year. And what year in and year out, the greatest and largest fraud in work comp is caused by employers and work comp carriers as opposed to employees. So it's non-employee fraud that's the greatest in value in most significant cases. It's not employee.
Yeah.
It's a one-off, right? For the most part, except in a COVID situation where they have to shut things down and spend a ton of money to clean, deep clean or whatever it is that they have to do, and the production that you lose. So, yeah.
Right.
It's already hard enough during this pandemic for businesses to stay afloat with PPP being offered through the government to help companies kind of bridge the gap and just trying to make your business, whatever industry you're in, to be relevant, to stay, not just to thrive, you hope, but to survive is really, particularly in the first 6 months of this pandemic. And then here comes this guy and takes advantage of the system. Now, albeit, like you said, David, he's not very good at what he does.
No, he's a dumb criminal.
But the best ones never get caught. So there's no telling what kind of other frauds out there that people are perpetrating, whether they're solo businesses, they're self-employed. There's always loopholes that people try to exploit. We just hope that it doesn't, ultimately harm the greater good, the larger community. But anyway, that's unfortunately, I know in February, March, April on our show, we're going to come back to other similar instances like this because people are just figuring those things out. But Cathy, one of the things for our firm in the last almost a year now is, like most every other law firm and business, is we've learned how to work remotely. Many of us took turns working from home versus working at our brick and mortar office at different times, so we'd have a lighter load in the workspace. Many, particularly in the larger cities, have never gone back into the actual office themselves. So where I'm heading with this is we're starting to see an uptick in claims dealing with folks who are telecommuting or working remotely from home or wherever it may be. Let me first ask you, has your firm had to go to some version of that, or have you all been able to come into the office as usual?
Well, so back when COVID first started last March, we were under a statewide shutdown order. So we, everyone had to go work remotely from home. And I think it was mid-June or so that we were allowed to return to the office. The order was, if you can continue to work remotely, please work remotely. Otherwise, you can come back, and then you have to have measures put in. My firm returned to the office. We have enough physical space that we were able to properly social distance, and we put up, protection with plexiglass. And we had guidance about, pretty much when you're moving around in the common areas, your mask. When you're in your workspace, you don't have to be masked and things like that. We operate, and I don't know about your client base, but our client base feels much more comfortable seeing us in person. And oops, is that too bright?
No, you're good. You're good.
But workers' comp and PA was able to pivot and move our practice online, so to speak. So we did all our hearings are remote, whether it's telephonically. via WebEx. We did Zoom for about a hot minute, but Zoom is not security cleared or whatever it was, so we couldn't continue with that. So we operate in that sense. We kind of worked in shifts, I would say, naturally. And then we had another shutdown right before Thanksgiving, where the city had another shutdown and asked, people that if you absolutely could not, please work from home. So we again went remote until recently, January or mid-January. So now we're kind of moving around. I myself have been coming and going to the office just because I can and I prefer. I'm not as productive as at home, unfortunately. And
Same. Same.
And also my husband's working from home, my daughter's been home going to school, and my dog is usually around doing some things. So I have some questions, and it hasn't ever been clarified with regard to working from home and if you get an injury and how that all, we haven't seen it, but there's going to be a case where, what if you ran downstairs to do your laundry and you trip and fall on your stairs?
That's where I'm going with this. David and I last month or the month before gave a seminar or a webinar on this very issue. Dave, give us the 30-second to 45-second recap, and then we'll head to the next article.
Sure. So Cathy, I think there's been about 10 reported cases since 2000 nationwide about employees being injured at home or remote while working remotely. And most of those cases involve one of three fact patterns. It involves, as you said, stairs, a family pet, and ice on the sidewalk or the driveway. And that was actually the first case out of Utah from 2000 was a stay-at-home worker who went out to greet his mailman to get a package that had been mailed to him, and he slipped on ice in his driveway. So we really learned a lot by researching those cases and presenting. And a lot of the facts just come down to, do you have a designated workspace? Do you have a designated work time? Mm-hmm. And of course, what are you doing? Like any case we have, it's fact specific. Yeah. Are you doing your job at the time of the accident? Yeah. So it's a really interesting set of. I would say
a diversion, as a coming and going rule, normally, diversion from your. I also have to wonder, as we move through this COVID times and as we start returning to work, if you ask your employer to stay at home versus choosing, going back to the office, does that provide your employer some kind of protection if you choose to stay home or not? I don't know. So. I don't know what your insurance carrier says.
You're benefiting that business. And I think that if the employer allows you to stay home at your request, I think you're covered. Again, fact specific. But let's move to this article, guys. It's called, and this gets into this a little bit differently. What we were talking about just now are employees working at home because they're, for various reasons, they work at home. But that type of work at home is not just pandemic related. That's been going on for decades. Mm-hmm. It's just greatly much higher percentage now. But what if you have a home-based business? And that's where we're going with this. Home-based business insurance. Not many people, it's when you say you're a small business or you're self-employed, most people just assume there's a brick and mortar that you walk to or you drive to, you leave your house. Well, a good percentage of people run a business out of their home. Mm-hmm. What type of insurance do they need? And I think this is pretty interesting. Cathy, did you get a chance to look at this article? Because I really think these are things that people need to think about. They don't know about.
Well, I mean, I think if you have a business out of your home, obviously you should have your own private homeowners insurance, right? Just to cover your home. I would imagine that your homeowners is going to ask for a rider of some sort if you're conducting a business out of your home. So you should have, general liability insurance out of that. And then I thought it was interesting that they recommended professional liability insurance as well. an E&O policy, and then obviously, recommending a workers' comp policy. Now, some people have workers' comp policies and some people don't. And I think if you are a solo, it might not be worth your while to get workers' comp, and you're better off getting yourself a short-term, long-term disability policy that might be cheaper on your own. I mean, granted, if you're a pencil pusher, your premiums are not going to be as high if you have a roofing business, or if you're tree climbing or things like that. So I think if you have a work at home type of business, I think you have to have a really good insurance agent who can walk you through all of the different policies. And I think you need to take a look at all the different policies, because your work injury, your workers' comp policy could be covered with your own private healthcare policy and having a short-term disability policy. So I think it comes down to numbers. What's best for you, and how much is it going to cost for you to get all these policies? Now, sometimes, and it's again based on age, I think, right? If you're a 25-year-old accountant versus a 55-year-old accountant, your disability policy is going to be a lot less at 25 than at 55, and things like that. So, but I think those are all very important things to have. And if you have anyone coming to your home to meet with you, to do any kind of business at your home, I think you definitely need general liability insurance in that regard.
Oh, absolutely. And David, don't you have to take the mindset as a business owner? I'm running a business. I may not be at a brick and mortar, but I'm still running a business at my home. Don't you have to take that mindset when it comes to insurance, that you cannot just stick your head in the sand, so to speak, and just assume, well, my homeowners will cover it, or I really don't need it because not a lot of people come to me?
That's certainly the prudent way to act. And as Cathy said, that's where a good insurance agent who understands your business and your needs can be of assistance. And look, it's worth it to pay a little extra to be overinsured almost.
Yeah.
It's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. And I don't think we've mentioned having an umbrella policy that would cover, again, not terribly expensive, but again, you just want broad insurance to cover any type of incident, especially if you're dealing with, as y'all mentioned, people coming to your home.
Yeah.
Well,
got to protect yourself, got to protect your business.
And especially with COVID now, we're ordering groceries online. Amazon makes, hourly visits, and you talk about the ice incident in Utah, you just never know. And you don't want to open yourself up if you pay a little bit more, you're covering yourself, in my opinion.
We don't think about ice on our driveways here in Alabama, Cathy. But that's a
tornadoes, or what is it that you guys have?
We absolutely
tornadoes and hurricanes.
Have tornadoes and hurricanes. But guys, we're talking with Cathy Surbeck out of Philadelphia with the Freedman Lorry Law Firm. This is our monthly YouTube live show. It's Work Comp Today, and we're plowing through the articles and news that make life interesting for us practitioners dealing with employees, employers, and independent contractors. And we're on article number 4, our last article for this show. And David, please remind me, was it Malcolm or someone else who's in one of the leadership positions with WILG that refuses to use the term gig economy? He has an alternative term for it.
Yes, and I cannot remember.
It's Roger.
Thank you.
Roger Fenderson.
What does he say? What does he call
Oh,
him?
gosh. You know what? I should know, because he and I planned the last convention together, and he was very adamant. It's not the gig economy. It's something else. And he said it so much that we don't remember anymore.
It's
independent platform
economy. The article is dealing with what Roger doesn't want us to say, but we'll say it because it's the article title. Gig economy workers need these 3 insurance policies. And why are we still talking about gig economy workers? Well, we're still in the pandemic. The world and the economy and how it works has changed, and maybe forever changed. So many more jobs have become available, or while others have gone away, But the ones that are so still heavily utilized, and I know I use them, our mother uses them, I know Dave and family use them, it's those who make deliveries. It's those who even, I don't know if Uber and Lyft and all of that is still as used right now, but I'm sure it'll come back in full force when folks get back out. But when you have food delivery, when you have groceries, whatever it is, we even have a bookstore in my neighborhood. They deliver to you. You just order it online. Anyway, that's one of the beauties of the internet. But these folks that I'm referring to, these may be side jobs, or they may be their full-time jobs of what they're doing. But this article, I think, is great. It is fantastic for people who do this kind of work to consider these types of insurance policies. And Dave, I'm going to let you start this one off of what you took from this.
Well, I wish I could, but I was unable to access the article. But I will offer this, and let Cathy speak to the article. I will offer this, that my family was in quarantine this month, and it was made a lot easier because of, I'm not going to say gig workers, independent contractors that were able to bring us food from restaurants and food from grocery stores. But again, we know that those are independent contractors. And the other thing I'm going to add is that you mentioned, Bernard, that these are sometimes second jobs for people. I talked to someone today who works for a big company here in Birmingham as an employee, but she was working as for a company that goes to grocery stores. And she's an independent contractor. Well, she slipped and fell on the sidewalk at the grocery store, and independent contractor. And we went through, well, do you have work comp? No. Are you covered through this? Are you covered through this? And went through our options. And anyway.
Yeah.
Well,
I think the article referred to them as freelance employees.
There you go.
Which is, and, traditionally, when it first started, it was the Uber and Lyft drivers that were, thought of as the gig economy. And then as I'm sure you two know, Bernard and David, California passed a referendum, which has now stated that Uber and Lyft drivers are considered independent contractors and not covered by Uber and Lyft. So in California, they would have to get their own insurance for everything, I assume. Now, in my neck of the woods, we have the Instacart people who grocery shop for you. I've seen them at Costco. I've seen them at one of the grocery stores where I think there were more Instacart shoppers than there were actual people like me shopping. And they would have two carts at the same time. And I was just like, that is just way too stressful for me. I can barely get my own shopping done as opposed to managing two carts. But my thoughts on that is, I think that we might think about, for us, the three of us, maybe going into business for this, because there's got to be a market for the insurance, right? Because it's probably expensive to get it individually, but if you bundle them together, for example, I don't know about down there in Birmingham, but here in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Bar Association offers group rates to solo practitioners for whether it's their professional liability insurance, whether it's your workers' comp, whether it's your healthcare. I don't know if any insurance companies have packaged any kind of deal for these freelance employees, that, hey, we'll offer you for $100 a month or something, we'll offer you general liability insurance, workers' comp insurance, health insurance or whatever, because, my daughter actually had asked about being a, one of those Postmates or one of those food delivery places. And we said, absolutely not, because you'd be driving our car, which is already expensive for a teenage driver. And now you're going to be doing it, making deliveries. I said, I think that might kick, they might, if you get into an accident doing that, the carrier might deny coverage because that's not one of the approved things. So I think for people who are doing that, I don't know if they thought beyond, I gotta just bring income in for my family. And I don't think they've thought beyond that, what the implications are. And David, like you were saying, with someone who slipped and fell on the sidewalk, grocery shopping. Now they're an independent contractor, but I guess their remedy in that sense is suing the grocery store, right?
Yeah. That's right. We looked at the potential liability of the grocery store and the premises owner. That's right.
But unfortunately, for those cases, while you might or might not have a good claim, that takes a couple of years.
Yeah. And she's on her own for medical care.
Exactly. So again, I think we circle back to, you should look into some kind of short-term disability, some kind of workers' comp. I don't know how much those policies are. I don't know how they're being rated or anything like that, but those are things that I think are important for them to look at. And I don't know if that's something that someone can put together and market to someone, or just, we can make the suggestions, but if the product is not out there for these folks to go and get, they're kind of stuck. So,
well, Cathy, you did bring up a good point. Most auto policies will deny coverage if you're working on the job and have an accident. So you really have to look at those policies to see whether or not, now, there may be a rider that can be added to it. However, as part of the article, and you've already touched on these, general liability insurance policy is one of the ones suggested. Professional liability, also known as E&O coverage, as well as work comp coverage, are the three that this article suggested for freelance workers, particularly those who are interacting with the public and maybe using vehicles to do their job. So those are all three things that, but with a caveat here, let's say that I'm a 25-year-old, I've just gotten out of college, I've gotten my degree, but have not gotten into my job, but I got to make some money because I'm now living and I got rent, expenses. Most kids, I'm going to call them kids at that age, most young adults at that age, can they afford these coverages? Can they afford that? And I'd be willing to bet a little bit of money that a great percentage of them will forego these policies and just take their chance.
Yeah, I agree. And that's something that maybe we can pitch to some advocacy group to put together, to talk to an insurance company, or, like in Pennsylvania, for the employers who are hard to insure for workers' comp, there's a state workers' comp insurance fund, that they can buy insurance from. I wonder if this is something that, legislatures can help these folks out and say, you know what, you're considered an independent contractor, whatever, but you're an essential part of the economy. We want to help you out. Let's pass some legislation. Let's create a state-sponsored fund. In Pennsylvania, we also have a state fund for uninsured workers' comp. When you're working for a company that doesn't carry workers' comp insurance and you get hurt, you can file a claim under the underinsured workers' compensation claim that the state administers.
That blows our mind right there.
Yeah.
Alabama, like most things, that's not recognized here, but boy, that would make life a lot easier for many folks who call us.
Like, let's say my firm let our insurance lapse or whatever happens. So if I get hurt, I can file under this policy, under the state. And then the state will go after my firm for the payments and for penalty. And then, depending on the firm, you might convert bankruptcy. But again, it's a protection for the injured worker to have.
Absolutely.
It's a great safety net.
Safety net.
Yeah. Well, guys, we've got just about 2 or 3 more minutes before we wrap up this month's show. And gosh, Cathy, we want to thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your experiences coming out of Philadelphia or Pennsylvania with us two Alabama guys. I always like to compare the different states' laws and process, policies, procedures, and you've shared some of that with us. So thank you for taking us down that road today.
Yes, thank you. And like David and I were saying, as well as you, Bernard, if you look on the WILG website, there is a list of states under the COVID. There's a COVID section that will tell you in your state what is their presumption, what the current state of the law is, and things like that. Now, as you can imagine California has some of the most liberal policies when it comes to COVID and everything like that. And if you two can believe this, in California, as claimants attorneys, we don't have to pay for any litigation expenses at all. The employer pays it all, regardless of whether or not you win your case. In Pennsylvania, if I win my case, then the employer has to pay for my litigation expenses. If I lose in its entirety, I don't get any of that reimbursed to me. So, if you look through that list, you'll see if you're not sure what your state is, that's a quick cheat sheet. I was telling David earlier that Virginia just signed into, I think, has some kind of regulation where they have a tier system rating your business and whether you're highly dangerous, medium to high, and that you're supposed to have COVID preventions, COVID education for your practice. And I think that goes along the lines with the vaccines there. So I think Virginia is hot off the presses with that. And that's the only one I saw.
Very good. Well, thank you for educating us on that, Cathy. David, any closing words?
Gosh, I don't know. I want to thank Cathy for joining us today. We appreciate it very much. But other than that, no, I'll turn it back to you and you can wrap us up.
All right. And again, Cathy, thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today. We always appreciate talking with our colleagues and friends from different parts of the country on this, because David and I talk all the time, but we love to have a fresh perspective, particularly somebody as knowledgeable as you are. So thank you very much for joining us on Work Comp today.
Yes, thank you for having me. If any of your audience has any questions, they're free to reach out to me. I can be found online at my website, or give me a call or send me an email. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Well, very good. Well, guys, this will conclude this month's episode. We will see you back in late February with a different guest and hopefully some non-COVID related articles. We'll see what transpires over this next month. Y'all continue to be safe, and we'll catch you another time. Take care.
Stay healthy.